No? Okay. Yeah.
In one of the videos, there spoke about wisdom is the ability to walk away from something you don't have capacity for. Or that was my understanding of what the video said. We talked about like the idea of capacity, what that means, kind of like humans' ability to continue on and certain things in a relationship.
Capacity. Okay. Your questions are also difficult. Well, let's talk about loss, freedom, detachment, and capacity, because they're all related, really. And I'll begin by telling you a story, and then we'll go from there. Some of you have heard the story, some of you haven't. It comes from my good friend Rumi, who died some few thousand years ago. Let's tackle the first one, capacity, because it's the easiest. You can never know what your capacity is, really, until you're tested. And oftentimes when you're tested, you just fail. And there is a point beyond which you can't go. I mean, you may think that your evolution is infinite, but it's not. All of us have a capacity. And once you find what it is, there is only so high you can go. There's a story in the Quran, which is the Bible of the Muslim world. And without making it too abstract, most of us in this class who have been single and wanted to be in a relationship and imagined ourselves that we have the capacity to be in one, eventually you find the companion and that relationship tests you only to realize you're not really ready for it. And then after a while, things either just fizzle out or you find a way out, hello Noor, of the relationship. So the first thing you need to understand, no one knows. No one knows what anybody's capacities are. You get tested, you know, it's kind of like when you want to move into a cult. Have you ever been in a cult? A good cult, what usually happens, I mean a really, really good cult, there is a school in Florida called Ave Maria, and one of my good friends, Michael Segru, teaches there. To be admitted to their humanities program, you have a committee of 5 or 6 really good instructors or professors who sit there and interview students. And they only accept maybe 25 to 35 students per year. And they ask them all sorts of questions to be sure that the students, you know, are intelligent enough, wise enough, insightful enough, experienced enough to be admitted to the program, because it's very, very challenging. You gotta read like 20 books a week. And that's what a good cult is. They test you beforehand, and should the committee members come to decide that they just are not fit just yet, they reject you. It's something that happened about 800 years ago in the context of Rumi and Shams. Rumi is this young kid who is religious. Shams is this old guy. It's kind of like Jesus Christ and John the Baptist, for example. You know, Jesus runs into John when John is like a 20-year-old kid. But Jesus comes to realize this, yes, you know, John knows a few things about this and that, but he's not really ready to listen. He's not ready to hear. He's not ready to change. So he says, despite the fact that he may have ears that can hear, what he hears, he won't pay too much attention to. So he waits and waits and waits until John reaches to be like 38. So good teachers, they can see what your capacity is, but also realize that you're not ready to embody that capacity just yet, so they walk away. Shams, who was a 60-some-year-old man, runs into Rumi, or 50-some, runs into Rumi when Rumi is only 20. And by the time Rumi is this 20-year-old kid, he knows the ins and outs of the Islamic tradition. He has 400 or 500 disciples. But Shams looks at this young kid and says, yes, he has fame, yes, he has knowledge, not wisdom, but knowledge, but he's not ready to hear. He walks away and waits for about 18 years. He runs into him again at the age of 38, and now he's ready. And the problem is that the tests that are going to be, or the challenges that are going to be offered to you are going to be enormous. Do you like me, Jalua?
Really?
Yeah. I mean, sure, as a teacher, student.
Enjoying the class and the conversation.
Fine. Would you like to come to our house for dinner tonight?
I don't think I have time.
How about tomorrow?
I don't know about that.
Why?
Because you are.
It's free.
And I don't know who you are or what your house is like.
So, you have lost the capacity to trust, to have faith, and that may have to do with your observation of the current climate of Oakland. It may have to do with your past. It may have to do with your bias and prejudice about teachers, students, all that stuff. So just in case you may have found yourself to be forgiving, compassionate, open to possibilities, you're limited by what you have experienced in the past or your own judgment. So your capacity is limited because of your past. So the story comes from Quran. It's about Moses and his lust and greed for more wisdom, for more experience. So one day he goes to God and says, I think I can understand more. I think I can receive more wisdom. And God keeps telling him, Moses, you can't. You have reached your max. Lust for things for which you have the capacity. Be greedy for things you have the capacity to receive and use or utilize. Don't be an infant. Moses says, no, I can. I really, really can. It's like your 2-year-old telling you, let go of the bike. I think I can, do this on my own. And you keep telling your kid, you're not ready. But the absence of experience, arrogance, pride, which comes with, when you're a kid that's just in your software, and you let the bike go, and the kid falls and breaks his neck, and looks at you and says, well, why did you let the bike go? So, one of the nice things about this story is the suggestion that all of us in this class assume that we have the capacity for things we're not ready for, but because of lust, because of greed, because of pride, and very many other components, we have no choice but to just follow our instincts and move towards the thing that we desire. God comes to understand that when someone keeps asking you again and again and again, there is something that's lacking in their observation, and you can't sit them down and have a conversation with them. So what you do is you challenge them. You put them into action. And God says, okay, I'm going to send you a fellow. He's going to walk into your life and he's going to make 3 requests. Just follow his advice. And should you be able to, I will give you things, experiences that you have longed for many, 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 many years. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So this man enters Moses' life. His name is Khezr. He usually wears green. That's a symbol for something we'll never talk about in this class. So the first request is, He runs into Moses and says, I am the guy sent to you by God. And should you be successful in doing what I ask, then God will give you what you're requesting. Insight, wisdom, this and that. And Moses, of course, like all of us in this class, say, yes, of course I can. It's not a problem. You know the Nike ad, just do it, you know. So it's a hot day. They're walking the streets, and this man looks at Moses and says, go knock on that door and ask for a cup of water. And he knocks on the door. Two tiny kids open the door, and Moses looks at them and says, can I ask for a cup of water? And the kids say, no, get lost. And this man named Khezr looks at Moses and says, you know, their fence in the backyard is broken. Let's go and fix it. Moses says, are you kidding? I asked for a glass of water. They refused to give me some water. You want me to now spend all of my time, energy, money fixing this broken fence? I'm not going to do it. So Moses goes to the backyard and fixes the fence on his own. I mean, this other guy, Khezr. Next, they go to a different town. There is this 2-year-old kid running around wildly, and this old man looks at Moses and says, here's my sword, go and chop off his head. And Moses says, are you kidding? This kid is innocent. I can't just kill him. And Khezr just picks up the sword and chops his head off. I know, it's awful. The third is they're on this boat, and there are all these old men and women and children on the boat, and this old man looks at Moses and says, drill a hole in this boat, let it sink. And Moses looks at this man and says, I'm not going to do it. Old men, old women, these children will all drown and die. And this guy does it himself. The first challenge, which was building this fence, had to do with these kids. When their parents died, they had left them a bucket filled with money under the dirt. And if you build this fence, their funds will be protected. When they get older, they would bring out that bucket and use the money for themselves, their wives, their kids, and their community. But Moses failed. Second, the kid would grow up to be a Hitler, or a Trump, or a Genghis Khan, or any person in this room that you don't like. That what this old man had seen about this kid is that this kid would become the future tyrant. And to save the community, it's best to just get rid of the kid. The third challenge was to drill a hole and make the boat sink. Because once the boat would get to the shore, there would be a bunch of criminals on this island, and they would behead or kill all the occupants of the boat. And so Moses failed all three challenges. And the point of the story is, it's very difficult to know our own limitations. You know, I had always believed myself to be to have a lot of patience. And then I had children. And then I realized every 5 minutes I'm screaming. And then it dawned on me that maybe I'm just not fit to be a parent. Because you just need a lot of stamina. It's something that women are really good at, but men really are awful at. Most men, at least. And so one of the nice things about the story is there is nothing wrong with greed. There is nothing wrong with lust. There is nothing wrong with desiring all sorts of things, as long as you don't go beyond your capacity. And you will never know that until you're challenged over and over and over again, until something about you gets cemented. You really begin to understand what you're good at, what you're not so good at, what you have the capacity for and don't. And that's only possible when you're challenged repeatedly. Now, if you were to connect the question of capacity to laws, it would mean the following. All of us have a certain psychological narrative about ourselves, and mostly they're positive. Unless you've been to therapy for many, many years and your therapist have made you realize that just as a human being, you just suck. And you need many, many years of healing before you can move on. But for the most part, if you think very highly of yourself, and when you're challenged, and when you realize that you can't reach to the destination you want to go, that's a loss of a certain self-image that you have. And you're going to fight that self-image that has been brought forth by the challenge itself, and you will reject it. You know, it's like anyone who goes to the doctor for a routine physical checkup and gets diagnosed with cancer, and they say, no, I need a second opinion, or a third, or a fourth, or a fifth. So, in brief then, the answer to capacity, you will never, ever, ever know. And you better hope that you're never challenged. Because then, very much like the movie The Matrix, you can always be taking the blue pill. You can always think great things about yourself. Yeah. If you're single, go out with broken people if those are the people who have always been attractive to you. Don't go out with someone healthy, because the challenge would be too much. Unless you find a way to put the pieces inside yourself that are broken back together, and then you can go out with someone who's healthy. And then it'll take some time for you to adjust. You'll fail the first few times, and once you adjust, then you can move on. Any questions about that before we move on to Lois and Chloe? Let's just say you're 20 and you've been in like 2 relationships. You're not done with school, you don't have a job, you don't have money. You're trying to figure out, as people today would say, trying to figure out who you are. And let's say you run into someone who's in their late 30s or 40s, and they happen to be a gem. I mean, you like them. And you want to build a life with them. The truth is, you're all over the place. I mean, you like stability, you're just not ready for it. And so what's going to happen is you're going to ruin his life. There's a good chance that at a moment of intimacy, you want to be a mother of his child. And then because you don't have stability for yourself just yet, your relationship is going to take about 2-3 years before it just falls apart. You know, 100 years ago, things were different. You and I lived in a tiny little village. My parents knew your parents. You were Catholic. I was a Catholic. There was only like 1 or 2 mini marts in our town. Everybody thought the same, looked the same, smelled the same, tasted the same. Hello, Chris. There was no diversity, which was a good thing. I didn't have to figure out who you are and what you are, where you came from, and why you think a certain way. We just knew. No sex before marriage. You don't drink, you don't smoke, you take care of your parents. And you don't move to New York. And you don't have boyfriends. And so when I marry you, there is a ritual, a custom in place. 6 months into our relationship, we have children. You stay home, I go to work. That's it. Now the story is very, very, very different. If you've seen the movie The Last Samurai, there is a scene where he wants to learn how to fight, and his friend comes to him and says, too many minds. And it's, to some extent, what he's telling him is, you're a Westerner, you're all over the place, and as long as you're all over the place, you can't do much. If that's a little difficult to grasp, grab a magnifying glass and try to burn a leaf. And the only way that's possible is by making sure that the sun, the rays, is at a single point, only then. Right now, you're just all over the place. Now, you can't go out with someone who's stable. The only price that you have to pay is get rid of your perspectives about things. Just submit. Whatever he tells you, just say yes. But you won't do that. You're a feminist, individual, independent, American. So, does that, Arvi, tell your parents I said hi.
Hi, parents.
So let's talk about, yeah. I'm sorry?
Is a tyrant born out of a lack of humility, or tyrants sometimes humble themselves?
I don't really know how it works. I'm not going to talk about sociopaths because they just lack the ability to kind of piece things together in a nice way. I think what happens is you're a blank slate, and forget reincarnation and all that stuff. And society, culture, customs, your parents, your relatives, your neighbors, advertisement, media, they begin to write on you. And desires are going to be born inside you. And then you want to kind of figure out what desires you have the capacity to pursue and bring to life. You know, last night there was an ad about Verizon. They'll give you a new phone. They'll take your old phone back and give you a new phone. And that's something I can actually do. I am with Verizon. It's a desire that was created inside me by the company itself. Now, the only price I have to pay is get myself in the car, go to the shop, and talk to someone, give them my phone, and get a new phone. That's something I can do, okay? Now, what happens is some of us are unfortunate or fortunate enough to slowly accumulate a good amount of wealth, riches, i.e. power. Now, some people do really, really well with power, and some people don't do so well with power. And that depends on the temperament, the losses, the benefits you've had in life. Now, let's just say if you've seen the movie The Experiment, it was a real thing that was done at Stanford some years ago. And so what you have is a religious guy who sits in his room, reads the Bible all the time, underlines it, highlights it. He thinks himself to be a real Christian. He takes care of his mother. And then he gets paid $1,000 to do this experiment. So you have about 20 people, 10 are chosen to be guards, and 10 are chosen to be prisoners. And so he becomes the chief of the guards. And he becomes the most violent, the most corrupt, and the most power hungry. Now, once you get power, it's going to take you some time. I mean, you get intoxicated, like the way you drink alcohol, and then you got to puke. At a certain point in your life, you have to throw up. Now, by throwing up, I mean maybe your wife will leave you. Maybe your kids will tell you that you're a jerk. Maybe your friends will leave you. Maybe you'll get sick. Who the hell knows how you'll throw up? And in the moment of throw up, you will become weak. And in weakness, you will attain humility. And in humility, you have insights. Now, those insights could stay, those insights could pass. If they stay, it means that you're slowly going to simmer, you're going to be seasoned. That inspiration is not going to go away. Most often, anyone who has power has glimpses of insight. They're just momentary. They come, they stay for a second or two, then they leave. Should they stay, those insight, if you were a tyrant, you will become a messiah. If, on the other hand, those insights come and go, you will remain the tyrant you've always been. It's complicated. I know I'm just giving you blank comments, but yeah.
Does capacity change on a regular basis, or is that something like tolerance, and how would you tell that?
First, it depends what you're looking for. And then it depends on the sort of a teacher that you have. If you're trying to learn the piano, my recommendation would be don't choose Mozart as your piano teacher at the beginning. Find someone who's been at the piano for about 5 years. Then if the 5-year teacher has enough humility and experience, he'll or she will look at you and say, Kavian, this is all I know. You got to go to my friend who's been at the piano for about 20 years. Then once you graduate from a 20-year teacher, then if, again, they have humility and they're not there for money, they'll look at you and say, listen, I know a friend, he's really, really good. Go to Mozart. Now, there's a chance that Mozart may look at the way you play the piano, the way you sit, the way you place your fingers on the keys, the way you put your feet on the pedal, and they may say, everything you've learned thus far is wrong. Okay, so depending whether, if you're a beginner, your teacher is going to be somewhat novice. And so the lessons he or she will give you are going to be novice. You will have the capacity for them. That depends on if you're not addicted to media, social media, video games, drinking, smoking, anger, laziness, all that stuff. So no question really is simple. It depends on so many different other components that exist in your life. But the best practice is, if you're a beginner, always choose a teacher who's not very good. Anyone else? Okay. So, loss. First, you can't lose what you don't have. Second, you can't lose what you've never experienced. So there has to be something about you that has felt ownership to something. If, for example, you go into the office and you're inspired to write and you do so, and then you go to the bathroom or you go to make a cup of coffee, you come back and the inspiration goes away, you have lost something. And you know what you have lost. And you know what you've lost because you experienced it just a minute before. Okay? Now, as you get older, now this is something that young people don't get. You're not going to experience the loss of time. You're not going to experience the loss of youth. You're not going to experience the loss of energy. You have it. You have glimpses of it once in a while, but it's not very mature. It's not very seasoned. It's not very real at that stage. Okay? Time needs to pass. You need to slowly begin to lose abilities. Then life challenges you. And then you realize you're walking slower. You're thinking slower. You're not as agile. You're not as fertile. And then you think back, you say, man, what the hell happened? So remember, you can't lose things you have never experienced. It's impossible. And whenever there is loss, there is also grief. That depends on what exactly your loss is. If you and I have been going out for a week, okay, and an 18-wheeler runs over me, and I die, well, you have lost a companion, yes, but it's only been a week. It'll take you maybe a day, then you will recover. If on the other hand, you and I have been married for 40 years, and then I die, there's a good chance you will never ever remarry. And that depends how abusive I've been, how attentive I've been, how nice or mean-spirited I've been. Okay? Now, the other thing about loss is, going to Andrew's question, it's about attachment, it's about emotions, it's about intimacy. Now, it doesn't matter if the relationship is borderline abusive or healthy. Attachment is attachment. There is an emotional connection. Okay? It's a connection from which you can't simply walk away casually. It doesn't work. Now, and remember, all relationships require time. Time creates stories. Stories create history. And history creates emotional attachment. And in all attachments, there is a past, there is a present, there is a future. The future contains hope. If I'm abusive, you hope that I die soon so you can get freedom. Okay? If you like me, there is hope that you and I may buy a house and have children. Now, let me tell you a story. So there is this bird. It comes from Rumi. The bird lives in a cage. And one day the owner says, I'm going to go to India. And one of the customs that exists in the Middle East is that when you go somewhere, you ask your parents, you ask your siblings, you ask your friends, your relatives, if there is something that they wish from India. Usually when someone goes to Iran, they call us and they say, Amir, do you want anything? I say, yeah, I'm looking for this book called Nardabana Asaman, Ladder to the Heaven. It's this brand new book about Rumi. It's about 5,000 pages. Now, I don't know if they're going to bring it or not, but nevertheless. So the bird says, yes, I want something. And the owner says, what is it? He says, well, you know, when you go to India, go to this place called Dehradun, and you will see this particular tree. Look up and you will see birds that look just like me, and tell them my story. That you have a bird in Oakland, lives in a cage, has all these songs to sing, but no one is there to listen to the songs. So the bird is quiet, silent. And she has been silent for many, 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 many years. In addition, tell them that your bird in Oakland that lives in a cage also has wings, but the bird doesn't fly. The cage is far too small. And the guy looks at his bird and says, well, that's a very strange request, but fine. On his way back, remembers his bird's request, goes to this particular place, looks up, there are all these birds. They look at this man and they say, what are you doing here? And he says, I have a bird. Has all these songs but never sings. Has wings but doesn't fly. And when he's done telling the story, one of the birds from the very top of the branch falls to the ground and dies. And the owner is saddened, comes back to Oakland. The bird asks him, well, did you tell them my story? Yes. And when the owner is finished telling his own bird the story of what happened in Dehradun, India, his own bird falls to the bottom of the cage and dies. The owner opens the cage, grabs the bird, throws in the garden so he can go and bury it, but the bird, upon leaving his hand, flies away. First loss. And it's something that has happened to all of us. You're a kid, you run around your house, you break things, you're inspired. You're like this true existentialist. You only do things that feel good to you. You're there only for fun. And your funs are innocent, they're simple, they're profound, they're meaningful to you. I want to watch Sonic. I want to watch Harry Potter. I want to break the plate. I want to break the window. Just want to see what lives inside all the stuff. They're fully alive. And it takes parents many, many years of screaming to beat the inspiration out of this kid. And then they become like us. It's great. You raise your hand to ask a question. It's great that you sit there respectfully with a great amount of dignity just listening to me talk, despite the fact that you're bored, that I'm just taking your life. But nevertheless, the fear for a grade, you don't want to be embarrassed by me or your fellow students. You sit there quietly. You don't find anything I say interesting, and rightly so. A kid would never do that, a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old. You know. And then at a certain point in your life, and I'm not sure how it happens, and this is the thing you need to understand, no one can be told what they are losing. It's something that needs to be understood from within, and I don't know how it happens. And that's the real education, you know, that you don't know the value of your car until it's gone. You don't know the value of being young and having time and having money and having energy until it's gone. Your parents keep telling you, go to school, don't go out with that loser. But you assume that you know better, like Moses, that you have the capacity for a great amount of abuse. Okay?